Sel.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm tired because I have a newborn puppy at home, and so it's the every 2 hours waking up. But it's a joyful tired. So yeah, and yourself?
I'm good. I'm also tired, I think, in one way. But I think when we have stuff that happens in life, I think trawling through the emotions of life can be very tiring, hey?
Yeah.
So today we're talking about the seasons of faith. And I often think the word seasons is such a Christianese thing to say, hey? But I mean, there's seasons in life that we live through. So seasons of faith, from consolation to desolation. And I think we kind of start life in consolation, not to desolation, actually to deconstruction. And we often start life in consolation, and then as we go through life, trouble happens, and the scaffolding comes down around us, and all of a sudden we find ourselves, not all of us, I think many of us find ourselves in a place of having to deconstruct our belief system, to find God in another way, or it's actually to find what we truly believe. So what have the seasons of faith looked like in your life?
And I grew up in the church, and so I never remember a time where there wasn't practices or like going to church, flannel boards, Bible stories, that type of thing.
Flannel boards.
Flannel boards. Do you remember those?
Yeah, with the little felt animal.
Oh man, you knew it was a good day when the flannel board came out. Scripture memorization lists and contests, and I mean, I'm highly competitive, so I was going to win that. I still remember the first scripture verse I ever memorized. But I think when you're a child growing up in a faith home, it's part of your life. It's part of the culture of your family, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the faith is personal. So, you know, some of my earliest memories would be going to church early in the morning with my dad, and in this little town that we lived in, and helping one of the men in the church ring the church bell.
What fun!
Hanging onto the rope, and I remember just God was there, but I didn't necessarily know God. And then getting older, coming into my teen years, and sort of getting curious, and what is life about? And I remember coming on my exchange year to South Africa, and everything had changed. The culture, the country, the school. I stayed with families for 3 months at a time. So, you know, I never knew where I was going to be a few weeks from now. But the one constant was God. And I think that's really when, I guess, my season of discovery of my personal relationship with Jesus and my deeper searching for God took place, because I found stability, I found an anchor, I found consistency in doing my daily reading. I went through the Bible in a year that year. So everything else could change, but the word was stable. There's the seasons where you're hope-filled and excited, and I think especially when you're young, there's lots of promises made. You know, you're going to be the generation that changes the world, and so you have big expectations, and then life happens, and you know, maybe some of those expectations weren't met, or you're dealing with kids and bills and, this idea of traveling the world, winning souls for Jesus. It's like, well, actually, it's a good day if everyone got through without crying today. And sometimes that can bring disillusionment and discouragement, because the big promises that we were given when we were younger, it's how do you walk that out in adulthood, in the daily grind, in the challenges that come at you when there's disappointments and hurts and betrayals. Like, it's easy to try to find the why behind it, make a solid reason. And when there isn't always a clear answer for why life gets hard, it can be easy to turn to God and go, well, maybe it's your fault, or get disillusioned. And so I think I had a little bit of a faith crisis when I was about 29, I think it was. I'd been married for 10 years, had 3 kids. We'd planted a church, and I was like, is this it? Like, this is hard. And also having to shed, I guess, my ideals, or even my false images or false understanding of God, and kind of coming to a place of how do I get into that authentic space of not living and borrowing other people's ideas and images, but how do I discover for myself? And because you get the Bible stories tell you and show you pictures of what Jesus looks like, for example, and that can very easily become your picture.
Yeah.
Or they talk about your experiences, how your experiences can shape your image of God. And you kind of come to a crossroads and go, well, what am I going to do? How am I going to walk through this? Do I throw out the baby with the bathwater because some things have been hard, or push through? And I pushed through, and there's been seasons of ease. There's been seasons of silence. And I think that's just part of being human. Even our earthly relationships, they don't stay the same. They grow, they get challenged. We go through times of joy and times of disappointment with our partners, with our children, with our friends, with our loved ones. So it would make sense to me that even in our relationship with God, there's seasons where it's easy when it's hard. Yeah. How about yourself?
We've been talking about how, we're called unleashing authenticity, but how hard is it to be truly authentic? Because I think what many of us have gone through in our seasons of faith are really hard things. And in telling our stories, we have to be careful about not pushing people under the bus, because that's not the purpose of this. But the authenticity of how we feel, and being brave enough to actually say these things over a microphone is quite difficult,
Yeah.
So my seasons looked like probably trying to win love for most of my life, coming from, even growing up in that space where it was all about keeping adults happy and pleasing the adults around me, to the point where it carried over into the church. And so as I tried to be the perfect child in a home, which I wasn't, because who can get to perfection?
Yeah.
Trying to be the perfect Christian, and being in a very long season of striving to be what other people wanted me to be, and be a good worship leader, but not too good because of your gender. You can't lead fully. You can lead or you can't even lead a band. Your husband has to lead it, even though he's not the worship leader. And I just, it astounds me now. But going through that, where I was fighting for, I spent 30 years of my life fighting for space and not actually being able to find it until I came to a place of deconstruction, because I suddenly looked back and thought, I can't live in this anymore. I can't live in this space where I'm not valued because of my gender. I'm not fully valued for who I am because I'm an opinionated woman, who's not allowed to have her own opinions. Because the men in my life had to be more, and the woman had to be less. So, and I think many women have gone through this. Many women go through, and I want to be authentic in saying, it's a patriarchal thought pattern that has been incredibly unhelpful to many women, but we learn to live in it. We reframe what we're going through because it's the right thing to do. And it's sold to us as women as faithfulness to God if you're submissive to all men around you. And it's just wrong. It is wrong. And it took me a long time to get there. So, one of my seasons was studying theology because I wanted to know for myself if I was wrong or if they were wrong. And because if I'm wrong, then I will change my thoughts and I will change my life and I will, But when I started to study scripture and really understand, I realized that they were wrong and they're not going to see that. And so, because when you're so stuck in a way of thinking, and I was stuck in that way of thinking in many ways, when the pain gets to a level where you actually can't carry on in that space, then the scaffolding begins to unshake and undo and then fall. And then you begin to ask yourself the truest questions of your life. And going from being in a form of consolation, because this is how you think, this is, what you believe, to going to a place of desolation, actually, to what is it that I truly believe? Who am I? Who is God? And what do I believe? The three most honest questions that we think when we're in a space of deconstruction. And I think if we're looking for what it means to deconstruct, I think that would be it. Who am I? Who is God? And what am I here for? What is my purpose? So, if you look at deconstruction, what do you see people going through?
I see people moving from cultural Christianity, asking questions about what has either been set as norm or has been adopted because this is how we do it here. And beginning to ask hard questions and wanting to go deeper and go past the structures, the culture, and what we've brought in to try to meet God. And so real faith is such a vulnerable process. I love how Brené Brown defines vulnerability as risk, uncertainty, and emotional exposure. Vulnerability is not meant to be easy. And we, I think, as people pleasers, a lot of that struggle with people pleasing, striving, perfectionism, don't want to rock the system. So it's, how do I conform? How do I behave? How do I show up in a system that I don't necessarily understand? And maybe that system doesn't quite line up with how I've read about God, or the questions I have about God, or even my own experiences with God and the Holy Spirit, for example. So that it creates like a tension or a dis-ease inside. And so I think part of deconstruction is taking that vulnerable risk of, I don't know what I'm going to find on the other side. Maybe everything that I've believed, known, and accepted is going to crumble. Or maybe I'm going to find what it is that I'm looking for on the other side. There's uncertainty and emotional exposure. I think people going through deconstruction can be perceived as a threat to a system because they're asking hard questions, and they can often find themselves maybe on the fringes. So belonging has been removed, which can be really painful, because you belong if you think like us.
Yes.
But when you stop thinking like us, how does that impact on belonging? And so the courage that it takes to continue down the road, to keep pursuing and finding God, and then rebuilding based on your discoveries, not just what has been culturally presented to you.
Yeah.
And each church has its culture, you know, so this isn't picking out one over another, but just as human beings, when we come together, we find norms and ways of behaving and believing and acting out rituals and things to express ourselves. We don't always understand the whys behind them. So I think part of deconstruction is going deeper than the surface to ask some of the whys, and to try to get a more maybe authentic, maybe engaging critical thinking, but also letting go and releasing. And sometimes it means having to walk away from systems that you discover have been harmful. I think, in your story, finding Jesus as someone who embraces and celebrates your gender, doesn't see it as a limit or a liability, was deeply freeing for you.
Totally freeing. And I think along that journey, so many people go through deconstruction alone because they think that they're being bad by asking the questions that they're asking. And I think that other Christians try to talk them out of their deconstruction, but you can't unsee what you've seen. And then still people within a system or other Christians will look at a person deconstructing and deem them backsliders. And I think it's so far from the truth, because you've seen a form of Jesus that has been taught to you. And I think that our image of God is hugely important. And we have this image of God that is portrayed to us by those in leadership, by the way that they treat people, by the questions that they ask, by how you treated when you make a mistake, how you called in to a meeting when you haven't been as good as you should have been. And you have to then take all of that and strip away what's been taught to you about who Jesus is and how we're expected to behave, because I think it all becomes about behavior, to this place where you search out Jesus for yourself. And I wonder if that is the place where Jesus actually wants us to be, because we've literally torn away our eyes from the Jesus that human beings are feeding us, to the reality of who Jesus is to me. And what does Jesus really look like if I search him for myself? And I don't think that many Christians actually do that until you reach a point of such pain that you have to, because that's all that's left for you to do. Yeah. I think that we have a lot to answer for within the church. And it's things get passed down, and I understand that. I knew a Jesus that was passed down from a generation before, and the generation before that passed down what Jesus looks like. And I think there's a danger in preaching so much of the New Testament to people, which a lot of it is about behavior. But if you don't preach the New Testament through the eyes of the gospel, through the lens of Jesus and his grace and mercy and compassion, then it becomes Paul's thinking, because he wrote so much of the New Testament, Paul's thinking about how we should live and behave. But so much is lost in the tone of why Paul was writing, how he wrote it, who he was quoting, because in many instances he was quoting the speakers of the time, and it's all misconstrued and misunderstood. And Christianity becomes about behavior instead of true, deep relationship with Jesus.
So, Sal, would you say that, you personally have gone through a deconstruction? And if so, how have you come out the other side?
I think that I have gone through, deconstruction, and getting to the other side was a journey of searching for the real Jesus for me. And if that is the other side of deconstruction, then I feel like I am there, but I don't think we're ever there when it comes to Jesus, because we embrace the mystery of who God is. So I'm journeying with the Jesus I know for Sal. But if in that deconstruction, I'm still triggered by things, then no, if that's part of the other side of deconstruction, because I think that we're still very much in the journey of emotional and spiritual healing from the way that we were treated, the way that we were blocked out of a system. And that takes a lot of getting to a place of knowing that that wasn't Jesus who did that. It was people. But also understanding that the people were doing it from their frame of reference, from their knowledge of who they think Jesus is. So it's in that journey, getting to a place of grace, but also in that space, understanding that there are things that I will not tolerate any longer. So it's understanding what triggers me, and understanding that thing, that is a way of thinking that hurts people, and I won't tolerate that. So generally I will push against that, and I will speak about it.
And what is your journey of knowing about God and to discovering God for yourself? What does that look like?
I think God in his kindness meets us in every season that we're in. And but the God I knew back in the day was the God who only accepted me if I was behaving correctly, according to how man thought I should behave. But the Jesus that I know now is the Jesus that sits with me when I've misbehaved, and the Jesus that sits with me when I'm not thinking great thoughts, the Jesus that sits with me in my spiraling. And because I think that when we deconstructing, we feel like we are bad people. And we couldn't be further from the truth. Because we learn to find, I think it's a journey of learning to be the beloved of God. Because you don't really feel truly loved by God, I don't think, when you're in a space of knowing about God. But when you truly know God for yourself, when you've searched and you understand finally who this God is that loves you and sits with you, and learning to come to a place where you can sit and say, I am loved by God. I think that that's a turning point for you, for a person who's going through deconstruction. Because while you're going through deconstruction, you don't feel loved at all in any capacity.
How do you think we as the church and leaders can do it better in supporting people who are on this journey?
Well, I think you can answer this question better than I can, but I'll just say allow people to ask any question they want without becoming defensive. And also not having the answers for them, sitting with them in the mystery of how they're feeling. What do you think?
I would agree. I mean, I think what you're saying is to not be threatened.
Yeah.
So there takes a level of being anchored in your own relationship with God to not be threatened by somebody else's questioning. I don't think questions are wrong. I think questions are necessary, because how do you get to that place without asking the questions?
Exactly.
Because questions can bring clarity and deeper understanding, and where we might make assumptions, it can lead to greater spaces of truth and discovery. I can understand where the threat can come in if it feels like the questions are pushing up against something that you hold dear. And for a lot of us, that system, we have held it dear, because it has been a place where it hasn't been all bad. We've discovered and learned, we have built relationships, we've raised kids, and I think maybe the fear of something greater is being threatened by someone who's deconstructing and asking the questions. Because sometimes I think what if it triggers other people to question? What if the whole thing collapses?
What if it's catchy?
Exactly. And I guess to an extent, what if? But then what if what we discover at the other end of it is something that is Jesus? So I think having security to not be holding on so tightly to your construct that you see someone else's question as rebellion, which takes some self-reflection as a leader, humility as a leader, the courage to be able to say, I don't know. I don't know. And that's okay to not know the answer, because we're not God.
Yeah.
But to not feel threatened by not being in the expert position all the time. I think some of the greatest leaders are learners that continue to sit under the rabbi, sit under Jesus, not try to be teaching over him. So there is that posturing of humility. But a lot of it comes from our own inner place of security, I think, as leaders. So, I think it's good to ask yourself questions and get curious if we notice the defensiveness rising or fear or anxiety rising. If the people in your community are asking the questions, it's not bad. But somehow we just want to squash it quickly.
And I think it's the difference between understanding that I'm not here to fight you. I'm here to have a discussion. And when you get defensive, it causes anger on both sides. But I always call theological conversations say that they need to be fireside conversations with wine, talking adult to adult, in maturity, about the things that we believe and the things that are not concrete about our faith. It doesn't matter if we think differently, because we can still be in that space with each other without completely agreeing. But both sides have to be okay with disagreeing and still be friends, but that's really hard for people. So I think, just in ending, I don't know how much time we have left, but just in ending, I mean, we were chatting in the little break that we had about what consolation and desolation means, because it's not a thing that people hear. And from my side, as studying spiritual accompaniment, it's basically just consolation means that you're moving towards God, and desolation means that you're moving away from God, that you're being pulled away from God. So when we go through deconstruction, we're often in a place of desolation because we're moving away from God, it seems like, until we come back and find that space of being the beloved, that we're moving towards God, and then we're consoled. We're back in that space. And I think that's also a good way to say, when you're on the other side of deconstruction, maybe you've come to a place of consolation towards God. What do you think?
I like that. I like that image of yes, it might have been pain that brought a person to that place of questioning, but the coming towards is like a coming home. And home can look different, but as long as you're coming home to the Father and finding that safety there, finding new discovery, finding deeper maturity, it can be a really enriching and sometimes necessary process in our own spiritual maturity.
And I think we can end there. Thanks, Karen.
Thanks, Elle.